Record. Okay, we're recording now. So this is Laws 13013, Legal Professional Conduct. This is Module 2, which is the second week of the course, and we're looking at tutorial problems 7 and 8. Okay, so firstly, I just wanted to let you know a couple of things. I've been posting up various additional materials onto the website. So if you had a look in week 2, if I stop sharing and just open up the actual Moodle site, there you can see the Moodle site, and you can see in week 2 there I've added a clipping out of a newspaper for today. There was a story there about these telephone booths for legal access. This is something that's actually been copied from the UK. When I was over in the UK a couple of years ago, there were these legal access red telephone booths where people can go in and talk to their lawyer if they wanted to. So that's now started up in Queensland. So I put that up there for interest, and also for you to think about think about the whole issue of that. There's a couple of other things that have gone up there as well, which we'll be looking at this evening. And these are 2 films which have come out of posts that students have put up. So I think we should have a look at those in terms of advertising. So I thought we might start off then by having a look at problem 7. So if I just open up here, so this is just in the discussion forum, and you can see there's been lots and lots of posts, which is good. We'll probably get to the point where we'll have, if we have, say, 5 posts up there that are quite comprehensive, then I think the additional posts should be more about commenting, critiquing, adding to whatever's initially up there. Otherwise, we end up with a lot of repetition. So, but it's good to see that people are expressing their views, and it's been quite good. I've been through all of these today, and I'm quite happy with what we're seeing. So we'll start off then by looking at problem 7. So you can see that this question is in 2 parts. So what it asks, firstly, is what features of the legal profession may create a negative image of the profession in the eyes of the public, and is this possible public perception a fair one? So that's the first subpart, if you like, and then it asks, find some examples of advertising by lawyers and the perceptions that this might create in the mind of the public, and how can lawyers improve their image. So I think maybe what we'll do is look at each part of the question. So we might start off just getting some views of what are the features of the legal profession that create the negative image of the profession in the eyes of the public. So what do you think? What are the sorts of features of the legal profession that create negative images? Any suggestions? Don't all be silent on me. It's nothing worse than me talking to myself.
I was going to say vexatious litigation and excessive or manifestly excessive charges.
Okay. Yes, that's certainly true. I think the biggest one out of those 2 is the perception of excessive charging. Does anybody actually know what law firms charge for litigation? Has anybody been involved in litigation recently or
Yes.
have knowledge of that?
Yes, and it's absurd.
It's very expensive, to say the least. It runs into $400 or $500 plus per hour. And years ago it used to cost just to say in a commercial cause matter or something like an injunction hearing in a Supreme Court, it was $5,000 easily just for those sorts of really minor arguments. If you're involved in an extended trials or appeals that go over several days, it can run into many tens of thousands and higher in terms of costs. So it's very expensive, all aspects of it. Whenever you get your lawyer to do anything, they have to, the practice of firms is that they write down every 6 minutes of their time, and they bill for it. And it's an horrendous process. So ideally what you should be doing is trying to avoid getting yourself in a situation where that happens. And, unfortunately, sometimes you just can't avoid it. But mediation and alternative dispute resolution are cheaper options than going down the full trial path. So certainly the costs of lawyers is one aspect of it. Okay, what other sorts of factors? There's heaps of them. How do Hollywood movies portray lawyers?
Criminals? No, not that bad. Not quite that bad. Although in some movies, and heroes at the same time. So some movies would be a hero. So Matthew McConaughey in that movie was probably a hero lawyer, but few and far between, I suppose.
What about Erin Brockovich?
Well, there you go, another hero.
And Erin Brockovich is actually quite relevant, isn't she, in terms of advertising by a Queensland-based law firm? Actually promote themselves using Erin Brockovich's
that's right. That's right. Yeah.
So it's seen as, in that case, that we saw a Hollywood film based on a real set of, a real person and a set of facts. So there was a positive image that way, but often lawyers are portrayed as, in quite a bad light. All right. What about the media coverage of lawyers? How has the media perceived lawyers? What about you, Margaret? You look like you're primed and ready to go. What are the media? How do they perceive lawyers?
Yeah, I think sometimes the media runs or picks what's topical for the viewing public. So if you have a lawyer that's appearing and or somebody who is sympathetically portrayed in the media, they seem to have a better coverage than maybe somebody who is representing someone who is not really in favour with the general population. So it just, I guess, depends on who it is that they're representing or what the issues or the facts of the cases are. I guess the other thing I was looking at as well is is just how people view what goes on in the courtroom as well. And I think I said in my answer, just even the gowns and the wigs and the protocols and the language, often that puts out the impression to the public that there's another world in here.
That's certainly the case. It's not very often that you actually get courts agreeing to have public access and filming that so that people can actually see what goes on in court. So quite often people's experiences are when they're involved in litigation one way or another, whether they're a party to it, called as a witness or what have you, and it's usually a negative view of the world. The other times they get into court are when they're called up for jury duty, and again. Criminal matters are interesting, but, they can be quite horrific too. So not everybody is really familiar with what goes on in courtrooms. So they form opinions by what they see in the media and what they see in films, and typically they're Hollywood films. I'd hate to imagine if the public perceived the Australian judicial system along the lines of Rake, if you've ever watched that. I've been including
my favourite show.
Yeah, I have been including some snippets out of Rake because practically every episode involves multiple ethical issues. So I'll continue to do that because some of them are quite humorous. But anyway, all right. So what other sorts of factors do you think? Delay. There's another one. Delay is often perceived being associated with lawyers. Denial of access to justice is another one. Only the rich and legally aided can actually can afford to be involved in any litigation to resolve their disputes. Some perceive class actions as being a way for lawyers to make large amounts of money, and I think that's probably fair comment if they're successful, but also carries large risks as well if they're not successful. Most of those are really prefaced on the basis of trying to get a settlement. And we've got large class actions going on at the moment in relation to the management of the Brisbane dams, but there's numerous class actions that go on. The idea that lawyers make money out of the misfortune of others, that's a sort of issue. Repugnant clients we mentioned earlier. So these repugnant clients are people like pedophiles and bikies, I suppose, as well.
Yeah.
And the whole perception of lawyers representing those. And we've seen some of those issues earlier in the course with being bolstered up by, state government comments as well, which is just adding to that. All right. So that gives you an idea of what sort of features of the legal profession create these negative images. Do you think it's a fair one? That's the next question. Do you think it's a fair image of what lawyers do? Now, some of you I know have been involved with lawyers. Others have been in court and seen what happens. Do you think that this is those sorts of perceptions, a fair comment?
No, I don't think so, because lawyers have a lot of money, but we do a lot of study, like we all know, to become one. And so, the profession, I guess you can charge that amount.
Well, that's right. I mean, you are paying for a lot of years of study, there's no doubt about it. Plus, if any of you have ever been actually worked in a law firm, there's other staff that have to be paid. There's office space. There's subscriptions to legal research materials, what have you, as well. So it all costs money. Okay, all right. Anything else you can think of in terms of whether this is a fair perception or not? So we've had one view that it isn't fair. Any other view?
It really depends on how you look at it, I think.
That's
like
right.
If you look at it from a person who doesn't have much money, who gets into trouble all the time, then they're going to think, oh, well, justice isn't for me because I can't afford it. Yet if you got someone who's got the money to do it, then they think, well, lawyers are good because they represent me, they give me what I think is right, and so I think it just depends which way you look at it.
That's right. If you can afford lawyers, they can be very useful things. You might have agendas you want to push, and if you can afford good lawyers that can help you achieve that, then well and good. Of course, if you're on the other side of it and you're having to defend or prevent something like that and you don't have those resources, then the whole system is pretty well stacked against you. So
I was just interested in how a profession with seemingly such a bad rap on what it is they do can still entice great numbers of people to come and join that profession. And I also wonder about what is happening with law societies and whatever about overturning some of that negative publicity or negative perceptions of their profession.
Well, we're going to actually look at that a little bit later in these questions, aren't we? So we'll come back to that, Margaret. What we might do now is really maybe have a look at some examples of lawyers advertising. Now, you've had a look at what the advertising rules require. So I thought I might play you a couple of examples that had actually come up from the postings from students today, which I thought were quite good. So just bear with me a second. I'll just play a couple of these and I'll just let this come up. There we go. And hopefully I'll make this loud, so hopefully it'll come through the system and you can actually hear it. Okay, so we'll play this first one.
We all desire something sweet. A bit of a worry. Here is the solution. New Jalna sweet and creamy Greek yogurt. Nothing artificial, no cane sugar, but as creamy and as sweet as. Pop it in your mouth.
We have to pay our sponsors.
Thanks, Dad. Thanks, Dad. Thanks, Dad.
Thanks, Dave.
So I think you get the idea. So
Yes.
this actually plays on TV in the West, surprisingly enough. So there's a rather poor example of advertising. Do you think that would be allowed in Queensland?
No.
Definitely not.
That's terrible.
No, I don't think it would be allowed in Queensland either. So that's one example. So we'll just go back to the other example. So I'll just bring this up. Here we are. And you can have a look at the full thing on the actual Moodle site. But this is another one. This is at the Super Bowl. So imagine what this cost.
I'm Jamie Casino. You may have seen some of my personal injury commercials on TV. I wasn't always a personal injury lawyer. I once was a notorious criminal defense lawyer who was employed by some of the most cold-hearted villains. My art brought me great wealth until one day my little brother Michael and his friend were 2 of 4 people whose lives were taken.
My brother was involved in a situation last night. He was shot. He didn't make it.
After the tragedy, our chief of police deceived you to make it look like the police department had lost control.
No innocent people were targeted.
Daddy, what do you do when you go to work?
At some point, a man must ask why God created him.
So it goes on and on. So there's an ad that somebody's played at the Super Bowl, and that would have just cost millions to run that ad in that time frame, in that football competition. So again, there's another form of advertising which wouldn't be allowed in Queensland. So what sorts of advertising do we see in Queensland for lawyers? Anybody got some comments?
A lot of personal injury advertisements, no win, no fee, personal injury. Yeah, I think that's pretty much all I've seen on TV.
I'll click record. Okay, we're back in business again. All right, so where we're up to is we had a look at a couple of American advertisements for, lawyers' services, and really none of those would be permissible in Queensland. I did ask the question, what types of advertising do we see? And we had the answer that we see the no win, no fee type advertising. We also see some advertising in prime time TV as well about, we fight fair or right wrong. There's a whole lot of these sort of slogans that are used. I've seen other ones. One that comes to mind was a sign outside of Guyra in New South Wales, and it on like a trucking route, and it had truck stop lawyers. You can contact them. That sign outside a roadhouse. And then there's other ones like there was a classic one. I'll have to try and find the picture of it again. It was a beer coaster, and so and it was advertising. It had this sort of cartoon of this drunk looking man, drowning in sorrows, and it was at the bottom of a glass of beer, and it was about divorce and all sorts of things. Appalling sort of thing. But I'll find that one and put it up. So that's another one that I've personally seen. Are there other ones that people have seen as well? What other ones have we seen?
Even when I was up in Cairns, there was a criminal lawyer up there. I can't remember their names, and they used to advertise on the back of a bus, and it had a picture of a pig's backside, and above it was like the caption, have been charged with a criminal offence, think you don't need a lawyer, and then it's got the pig's ass underneath it. Like and I was trying to find it on the internet. I don't know if they've got it anymore. This was a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
But Yeah.
That's appalling. There's one that a student put up earlier today. Can you see that one with the divorce lawyer in the elevator?
Yes.
Isn't that pretty tacky? But anyway, so there's lots of these things out there. I've written this answer here, which I'm going to give it to you. I'll put it up on the website, but just comments from different students. So the Shine lawyers and the Aaron Brockovich thing, and Slater and Gordon, and there's another one, Parker Simmons, solicitors and lawyers. We'll advise you up front what our charges will be for all common legal tasks so that you can plan ahead with peace of mind, knowing exactly where you'll stand financially. It's very nice of them, isn't it? They're actually required to do that by the solicitors, the Law Society rules and what have you. So there's a whole host of things there as well. Actually, Ethel Brew, she had some really good comments. I don't know if you read her posts on the website today. I really like this one. She said, many people think that the decline in public esteem for the profession began with the Watergate scandal in 1973. Nearly all of the protagonists were lawyers. This trend was exacerbated by publicised trials such as the O.J. Simpson case in 1995, in which defence lawyers like Johnny Cochran were widely blamed for what some of the public saw as a miscarriage of justice. Saturated media coverage of famous trials brings them into millions of homes, and irresponsible news analyses of the trials oversimplifies them, creating them as entertainment. So, there's quite a lot of examples of these sorts of things. So I just put that up there for a bit of fun so people could have a look around and just notice. Because sometimes, often you don't actually notice these things because they're just there all the time until you actually start looking. And then you see them everywhere, buses and radio, newspapers, beer coasters, all over the place. Okay, so what can lawyers do to improve their image, do you think?
Well, I think it's by pro bono work and also getting involved with charities.
Yeah, that's good. I'm listening. I'm just sending a message off to poor old Margaret who's trying to join in. Okay. All right.
Yeah,
so,
I'm back in now. I'm back in now.
Oh, you're back. Yes. Sorry about that,
Yes.
Mark. I think we're in business now. I figured out what the problem was. Okay. So I've listed a few things there that lawyers could do to improve their image. So, and these came largely out of what the posts were today, plus a few others I had in an answer guide earlier. But you can see them there. High-profile pro bono work. It's good because it attracts media attention, so it's free advertising if you get that. But it's also good for the recipient of the pro bono work, and often it's good for the lawyers. They don't have to worry about the billing for it. Sponsoring community sporting and other activities. Avoiding fraud. Well, that's a good idea. Targeted positive advertising is always good. Humanitarian and charity work. Actually having fixed fees rather than fees calculated on time. That gives more certainty. Service or community service or service on boards. I was on the Legal Practitioners Submission Board for years. They're all unpaid positions. There's board positions on charitable organisations and companies and all of those sorts of things. So the lawyers do that because it's good networking, and it's good also because they're interested in supporting the community. So it goes sort of hand in hand with this notion of the profession. There was a reference earlier today. I'm not sure who posted it up about a moral compass, which was a really good posting. It's there, so you should have a look through the website, and it's something that the Law Society puts up, and it's not a bad thing. If I'd have seen it earlier, I would have put it up in week 1. So look out for that one. So you can see there's all sorts of other things there. I've just included these things in the answer guide for you to have a look at. And as I say, I'll put this up after this session ends. Probably I'll do it tomorrow morning, I'd say. Are there any other sorts of things people can think of that lawyers can do to try and improve their public image? Anything else? Fun runs, they do that. They sponsor sort of those sorts of things. No? Okay. All right. I'm just wary of time too because we lost a little bit of time. So we better start this second question. So here we have Murray Stacks. The managing partner of Stacks, the law firm, is considering advertising strategies to build his existing personal injuries practice and a new practice in migration law, an area which the firm has no current expertise. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll stop sharing. So I don't want you to read the answer that I've got because I want you to participate. So what he's doing basically is he's got various strategies he wants to employ. So the first one he's suggesting is leaving business cards in the reception and emergency sections of the local hospital. It's always a classic ambulance chasing type approach. What do you think about that? Is he going to be allowed to do that? What do you think? Anthony, what do you think about that?
I don't really know. I would say no.
Well, you're
Like,
right.
isn't
But
that
you're going to have to.
inappropriate?
Can anybody help Anthony? She's right, but she doesn't know why she's right.
Wouldn't that be inappropriate? Like, it's not a good place to actually put your, advertise your business there.
I would have thought it'd be a great place to advertise. All those personal injury patients. You get a whole hotbed of potential people that will want your services. But
yeah, well then every other law business will want to do that.
Yeah, exactly. So that creates a problem, doesn't it? All these people are injured in hospital. They don't want to be inundated with lawyers pressing cards into their palms and signing them up for litigation. So what does the law do? It prevents that from happening. Does anybody know the provisions? Because when you set out an answer to a question like this, you've got to set out the provisions. So you can look at it in a sort of a moral.
What provisions are you talking about?
Sorry?
What provisions are you talking about? Is it the ethics, like the Australian
there's statutory provisions that deal with this.
Section 5 of the Personal Injuries Proceeding Act.
Yeah. So what does that say?
It states that that there's publications which are not allowable, and one of them is a public exhibition of the statement in or on a hospital. That's
right. That's exactly right. So there's a whole host of provisions that cover this. So there's the Personal Injuries Proceedings Act 2002. And in Section 64 of that, it talks about the meaning of advertising personal injury services. And it includes things like making a claim or trying to encourage or induce a person to make a claim for compensation or damages for personal injury, or to use the services of a named practitioner or a named law practice with respect to that. It defines a business card, for example, as being an advertisement. And it has specific provisions in Section 65, subsection 2, which it's not allowable to actually place these things in public exhibition at or in or on a hospital. So you can't do that. And it's got a 300 penalty unit fine. Last time I looked, a penalty unit was worth $110. It's probably worth more now. So that's a pretty steep fine for doing that. And you can't put it on a printed document gratuitously sent or delivered to a hospital or left in a hospital or on any vehicle in the vicinity of a hospital. So there's all these very strict rules about that type of advertising. And there's some other provisions there under the Solicitor's Conduct Rules 36 that deal with advertising as well that this would fall foul of. So basically, this whole idea of leaving business cards in reception and emergency sections of a hospital is prohibited. So when you get a question like that, you've got to say, you can look at it at the moral point of view, but you've got to also know the specific provisions. Okay? So you'll get used to that as you go through the course, because we'll be looking at more and more of the actual legislation that deals with these things. Okay, the second one is providing a 10% finder's fee to nurses and ambulance staff whose actions result in a new client for the firm. Okay, so that's a pretty good strategy, isn't it? The first responders to an accident, give them a whole bunch of cards and shove them in the people, lying on the side of the road after they've had a traffic accident. So what do you think about that? Do you think that's something that's just on a moral ground? Do you think that's something that's likely to be allowed?
No.
No.
Definitely not.
Of course not. So there's a prohibition on that, and you can find out in the Personal Injuries Proceedings Act 2002, Section 68. It says prohibition against paying or seeking payment for touting, as they call it. So it says there, a person must not pay or seek payment of a fee for the soliciting or inducing of a potential claimant to make a claim. 300 penalty unit fine. And it specifically talks about hospital workers and anybody who can provide patient details. So that's basically a breach of those rules if Murray thinks he's going to try that. So what's his next scheme? He then thinks, well, let's place a sign on a bus shelter on the main road outside the local hospital. And the sign reads, injured, get heaps for your trouble, free initial consultation, phone, blah, blah, blah. So there's the telephone number. So what about that? He's got this great plan. It's not on a hospital. It's not in the hospital. It's actually across the road on a bus shelter. What about that? What do you think about that?
Well, he can advertise, but he can't have a sign that reads injured, get stuck for your trouble. I think they can only advertise their name and their phone number. I'm just trying to find I think it's I looked at Section 65 of the Personal Injuries Proceeding Act.
Okay, well, have a look at Section 6. Well, go back one. Have a look at Section 64 first. It says, meaning of advertising. It says, for this part of practitioner, it's easier for me just to put it up. Hang on. Okay, see it there? For this part of practitioner or another person, whether or not the other person is acting for a law practice, advertises a personal injury service, a practitioner or person publishes or causes to be published a statement that may reasonably be thought to be intended or likely to encourage or induce a person to make a claim for compensation or damages under any act or law, use the services of the practitioner or named law practice in connection with making the claim mentioned above. Okay, so it then says, for this section, a statement is published if it is, and then CE, publicly exhibited in, on, over or under any building, vehicle or place, or in the air, in view of persons in or any street or public place. So, what does that amount to? So how does that help us? That's what advertising means. So it's certainly advertising. There's no doubt about that. Now, is it allowed under Section 65(1)(d)? Because if we go back, if I just skip up here, if I just find 65, hopefully I've got a copy of it here. No. Well, 65(1)(d) essentially was talking about whether it was in or on a hospital. And it doesn't fall foul of that because it's actually across the road on a bus shelter. And you actually see these signs across from hospitals. If you actually have a look around, you probably will see them. So it doesn't actually fall foul of the provisions. We've then got Section 66, which says you can actually publish things by an allowable publication method. So it is a publication, there's no doubt about that. And it says a practitioner or another person must not advertise personal injury services except by the publication of a statement that states only the name and contact details of the practitioner. Well, we've got that, haven't we? So what's it say? It's name and contact details. You've got the contact details, you've got the name, which is basically stacks, I think, in this case. Together with information as to any area of practice or specialty of a practitioner. Well, they are a firm that deals with personal injuries. It's published by an allowable publication method. Well, it is allowed. So I'm not sure this actually breaches any of the requirements. So which one were you looking at particularly when you say it was a breach of the requirements?
Well, I just thought that he could advertise, but it was the words in the advertisement that he would have to, like I thought the injured bit, get Stacksfield trouble-free initial consultation. I thought that, well, he couldn't have that. He could only basically have the name of the firm and his contact number.
See the example they give, example of advertising to contravene subsection 1, advertising personal injury services on a no-win, no-fee or other speculative basis. See, this one's actually arguable either way. That's the interesting thing about it, because he could argue that what he's saying is he's advertising his specialty. He stated his contact details, the name of his firm. So the only words that are in addition to that is the word injured and get stacks for trouble. So, I mean, you could argue that that is a breach in the same way of saying no win, no fee is a breach. But it's not clear.
I took the view too that, injured, get stacks for your trouble. The interpretation of what the public might see that as being, and getting stacks for your trouble could indicate to somebody that, yes, I'm injured, I go to this person and I can expect to get some compensation or whatever it is.
Well, that's certainly one view, and that may well be the prevailing view. But I think it's arguable either way with this. So one of the things you'll discover as you go through the course too, there's not necessarily definitive answers to everything. So this is one which you could argue either way. Okay, well, let's keep going. So the next one is Murray having a 1-hour talkback spot on a local radio station advising on legal issues and commenting on the outcomes of cases in the local court. Now, you have to assume here that this is the outcome of the cases. So they've been heard in public. So it's a matter of record. It'd be different if he was commenting on cases that are in progress. That would certainly be problematic with this rule here about standards of conduct, because that would potentially be prejudicial to the administration of justice. So you'll have to be careful about what he says, but there's nothing wrong with commenting on cases that have been heard. Otherwise, nobody would be able to write a textbook. No one would be able to, have a tutorial question on cases or talk about them. So the only rule that applies is this one here. Solicitor must not engage in conduct, whether in the course of practice or otherwise, which is dishonest. So presumably, if he's not, if he's saying something that's honest, he won't fall foul of that. Calculated or likely to a material degree to be prejudicial to the administration of justice. Diminish public confidence in the administration of justice, adversely prejudice the solicitor's ability to practice according to these rules. Now, obviously, it's going to depend on what he says, but if he comes out and says that judge is a complete idiot, they've got it completely wrong, they shouldn't be sitting on the bench, that's going to fall foul of that rule without any trouble. But if he's just talking about the outcome of the case and that he says that somebody was found guilty for doing this is the sorts of circumstances where it arose, there's nothing wrong with that. And you do actually see these sessions on radio. They do exist. So provided they're careful not to breach this Rule 30, then I don't see really a big problem with it. He's got to be careful not to advertise his personal injury services. He can't sort of say, oh, and by the way, we run a personal injury service on a no-win, no-fee basis. He can't say that because that'll fall foul of Section 66 we talked about earlier. But if it's just commenting on the local cases, there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, well, let's keep going. Sending brochures in several languages to all Australian consulates around the world indicating Stacks the law firm's expertise in migration services. Well, what's wrong with that to begin with? Do they have any expertise in migration services? No. So, they're being dishonest at the outset. They could really only advertise that if they've got they've hired a migration lawyer and they work in their firm, but there's no evidence of that. Murray figures that he can brush up, he can either brush up on his skills in this area, which he doesn't have any skills in the area, so he'll be learning, or hire new staff to deal with any clients that arise. well, really, he shouldn't be making those comments if he doesn't have that capacity. So he has to first have that capacity. Okay, so that you can see there's problems with that. And it's more about the Australian Competition and Consumer Act. It's just false and misleading advertising under that. And I've given you the sections there, Section 18 in particular. So this is the new version of what used to be the Trade Practices Act. And it's probably a breach of the Solicitors Conduct Rule 36 as well, which you can have a look at. So there's problems there. Then the next one is visiting legal studies classrooms at local schools, lecturing students about their rights and handing out mouse pads with the phrase, need legal help, one click and get stacks. You can just see him doing it, can't you? So what about that one? So you've got a suggested answer there. Do you think that's right?
No.
Do you think it's a breach of those rules we were talking about earlier? Is it an ad for personal injury services? Doesn't say anything about personal injury services.
No.
It's got the contact details, I suppose, you know, one click and get stacks. So he's got the name of the firm and he's got the one click. So that's a way of, you know, getting to the service. You know, I'm not sure that's a breach. And as long as he's not, you know, being dishonest or he's breaching these other rules of diminishing public confidence in the administration of justice like we looked at a moment ago, then he's probably fine with something like that. It's important to realise that not all forms of advertising are going to fall foul of the rules. You know, all these law firms will be looking at how they can advertise without, you know, breaching any of these rules. And they can, because you see plenty of ads. So it is possible to do. It's just that they get very niggly around areas of personal injuries, anything to do, particularly where somebody's at a disadvantage. So if you've suffered a personal injury, you're at a disadvantage because you've been injured. So you're vulnerable. So there's more, you know, there's more regulations come into play in that sort of situation. Okay. All right. Are we happy with all that, or at least if you're not happy, do you understand where we're at with all of these rules? Did you have any particular questions, problems? As I say, I'll post all these up on the website for you. You can read all of this. So you don't need to take notes on any of this. Are there any particular questions?
No.
No. Get yourself a copy of that Personal Injuries Proceedings Act. Get an electronic copy of it, and just go through those rules. You know, 64, 65, 66. All of these provisions that you see appearing in these answers, and also that Section 18 of the Competition and Consumer Law. There's two sections, 18 and 29 are the main ones. And just realise that law practices fall under the ambit of this Competition and Consumer Act as well, because it's providing a legal service, so it's a service business. So it falls within the terms of the legislation.
Which I'm doing in commercial law at the moment.
Sorry, you're doing commercial law with Chris Walcher, are you?
Yes, yeah, and this week is actually on the ACL.
Okay, well that's good. So you'll see a bit of a crossover between the two courses, so that's good. Okay, all right. Well, sorry about all this mucking around tonight. We lost half our audience, but I know what went wrong, so that won't happen again. So I'll just be careful about which account I log in on. I think poor old Anthony Marinac was having trouble with evidence because he was trying to start halfway through our one and he's using the same account. So that's what happened. So that's unfortunate, but we'll be right next time. Okay, all right. Well, look, we might stop then if no one's got any other questions. And, I'll look forward to talking to you next week. If you come across any more ads or anything, just put them up on the website. As I say, I've been adding in all sorts of things as I come across them. There's lots of ethical issues. If you get a chance, have a look at Rake. So, as I say, that program is just full of ethical issues. I think it's on a Sunday night or something, 8:30. I might be wrong, but it's full of ethical issues.
Is that on ABC, Stephen?
It's on ABC. He's the most horrendous lawyer you've ever come across. So it's quite funny. But last week's episode was all relevant to money matters. Actually, he was running 4 matters simultaneously in different courts and royal commissions, and he was running between the two. And then he decides to charge everyone for his time. So he was billing 4 days worth of time simultaneously on the same day. It's just, yeah. So it was worth watching. It's worth watching just for the ethical problems in it. But I do put them up. You would have noticed. I think I've already put one up already on the site. It's in a later week. It's in. I can't. Yeah, I've started putting all sorts of things up the later weeks about that concern Rake and a few of the things he gets up to. You'll see them. Okay, all right, look, we'll stop there. It's time for dinner. It's getting late.
Yes, great.
So we'll call it a night, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks, Stephen. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.